If the Democrats were to get behind someone like a Mark Cuban, that would be the best approach to defeat Trump, because you have someone who's a mavericky, no pun intended, mavericky billionaire businessman who is capital I independent. He's not a creature of the establishment. He's not like I think if you run anyone who smacks of Washington, D.C. or capital D Democrat, you lose. One of my beliefs is that Americans have just been casting about for change over and over again. Like Obama was change, Bernie was change, Trump was change. Joe, strangely enough, was changed from Trump because people were like, okay, like I'm a little bit tired of of this shtick during the pandemic. And then now people, in my opinion, are getting tired of Joe. And then if you run Amy or Pete or Kamala, they're going to be the establishment, and they're going to have they're probably going to lose to Trump. So you need to go outside of the establishment and get someone. I think Cuban would make sense. I think if you were to go really far out, like you and get even like a well-loved celebrity figure, like an Oprah or The Rock, or like one of these types, I think it would steal a lot of the thunder from Trump. I mean, there are a lot of people that just, again, they want to change. They want someone independent of the machine. They want someone who can hold their attention in a positive way. And not just say political pablum that's bullshit. This week on Forward, 2024, is it going to be Biden-Trump? Are there better choices among the Democrats? We actually think about who the Democrats could and should field in the next presidential race. Also, the terrible Michigan shooting, Chris Cuomo getting fired by CNN, Elizabeth Holmes, and more this week on Forward. And we are back on the Forward podcast. Why are Zach and I not in the same place? If you're watching this video, it's because I am at an AI conference in the Caribbean. I know, it's a bit of a boondoggle, but here I am.
You are living the dream, man. You're living the dream. Evelyn just posted a picture of you on Instagram covered in monkeys. What are those?
Those are lemurs. They are delightful. They have thumbs. Their fingers feel like little tiny leather suction cups.
That's weird.
I highly recommend feeding lemurs if you ever have an occasion to do so.
Yeah, actually in college we had a lemur center on campus. I got to go.
It made me ask them, why have we not domesticated these animals, because they're so adorable and gentle and friendly? And the answer was that the lemur will just run away and you'll never see it again. That's apparently why lemurs are, not good pets. Learning a lot about the future of AI, meeting some great people, obviously sharing some words of wisdom too. But I want to start off talking about this cover story in The Atlantic, which is very much been on my mind. And it's not the first time it's been raised. It was raised by Bill Maher. It was raised by Robert Kagan in the Washington Post. But the theme is that there is a Trump plan to essentially win regardless of the vote count in 2024 as a follow-up to the undermining of the election in 2020. And there's this massive, the big lie, stop the steal, the election was stolen, line of argument that is believed by tens of millions of Americans. And I guess, I don't think I need to say this, but I obviously don't think that stuff's legit. Like, I think that Trump lost the election, according to every shred of information that I've seen. And that
the courts have seen too, bud.
Yeah, the courts. I mean, a lot of the stuff was spurious and thrown out. This Atlantic article is worth reading, and I think this has to be front and center because I'm getting very, very frustrated by the fact that there's this impending disaster coming down the pike, and everyone's like, oh, we can't do anything about it. So we're going to talk about what the heck can be done to preserve democracy in the face of Trump running in 2024. Now, a few things I want to stipulate really quickly, and some of this we've said before. Yes, I think Trump's going to run. Yes, I think he's going to win the nomination. He's going to be in great position, maybe to win straight up. And so first, let's try and review his opponent. Who the heck is going to represent the Democrats in 2024? Now, the obvious choice is Joe Biden, the incumbent who defeated Trump once. The major drawbacks are that he will be nearly 82 years old. He'll be 82 in November of 2024. So he'll be like 81.9 when election day is coming around. And his numbers right now are not great. I mean, a lot can change, obviously. But right now he's at 42% or so. 81 is pretty old. 81.9, I mean, that's a thing. And this is a tough job. It ages you quick. So next up would be Kamala Harris. But Kamala, the last number said that she polled 6 points worse than Joe. And so here's my major push, is that the Democrats need to figure out who the fuck is running in 2024 and get behind that person now. I mean, maybe you don't need to spill the beans with the rest of us. like maybe you don't want to come out.
Yeah.
So the tough thing here is that Joe does not want to be a lame duck. He doesn't want everyone just to be like, okay, you're one and done. So he wants to pretend like he's running again in 2024. I think he genuinely wants to run again in 2024. But I think that, that like the man is old and he's going to be like the visible avatar of a fading establishment. You know what I mean? Like he was old this time. And, I've been around Joe any number of times, over the months when we were on the trail. I would literally speak before and after him in New Hampshire and Iowa. How many times were you around Joe with me, Zach? Like how many times?
A lot. Yeah, a good amount. My favorite Joe Biden moment, dude, was before the Miami debate. It was our first debate, so we're nervous as hell. We all line up in the hallway, and Joe was like late, and he came in, was like, I say this like I didn't think he was going to win, that sort of thing, but he was so damn smooth walking into that line. He would like look like a silver fox, cool as a cucumber, like a dad at a barbecue, just like shaking everybody's hand, giving a big smile, big grin. It's like, damn, dude, that's a politician. Like I don't know how to explain it. Like he was just cool, calm, collected. I'll never forget that ever. But he was like great to you, and you guys got to know each other pretty well, or at least friendly wise.
Yeah, and I saw him campaign when he was fairly robust and doing well. I saw him on other occasions where he was not great, he did do poorly in both Iowa and New Hampshire, in part I think because they saw a fair amount of him, and day to day Joe was not killing it on the campaign trail.
Yeah, my moment was like one small backstage moment. Like day to day, he feels older,
Yeah, no, I mean, I like you're right that there were periods too when he was very winning. Like I always got along great with Joe. I like Joe on that level. But when I've seen him on TV lately, even I can pick up a difference between him now and him 17 months ago or whatever the heck it is. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like when there's something happening. And again, this job ages you quick. Now, so Joe does not want to talk about him not running again because it makes him less relevant and into a lame duck. And no one wants to talk about the fact that Kamala may not be the pick. But you can tell that there's a ton of anxiety around Kamala as the next standard bearer for the Democratic Party because of all these negative press stories that are coming out. Someone in the Biden administration certainly in on.
These are leaks. These are planted stories. Yeah, they're trying to either blame her for mistakes of the administration, which happens all the time in president vice president relationships, or beat her up enough so that when they can open up the primary.
So this is my concern, Zach, is that the Democrats don't really reckon with what the heck's going on. 2022 rolls around. Democrats get wiped out by the Republicans in the fall in terms of the House, maybe the Senate, but almost certainly the House. There's a pall that falls on the Democrats in D.C. Everyone's like, oh no. 23 rolls around. Trump declares. The Democrats still haven't figured out who's running, and then they essentially default to Joe because they're like, well, but then Joe runs and just loses straight up to Trump. I see this as the most likely scenario right now. Now, the next thing up would be that Joe, he literally could have a health problem, and then Kamala could become the acting president or and then be running as essentially the incumbent. So then you have that dynamic too, where it's Trump versus Kamala. I think that Kamala is a much better chance if she's the incumbent than if she's not. But at this point, I can almost see in my mind's eye like there being this collective freak out in the Democratic Party trying to figure out who's going to run. And then I don't think Kamala clears the field. And then you do have a competitive primary. And you and I are now going to talk a little bit about what the heck that field looks like. So this is frustrating to me because I think that there's still no real sense as to who the Democratic standard bearer is going to be. And if they're in figure it out mode in 23, maybe that's fine in the sense that, like maybe you need for lightning to strike. But one thing that I do know is that most of the Democrats with national aspirations ran in 2020. Like it was a wide open field. There were 24 candidates. Like if you were someone who thought, hey, I might want to be president, you probably ran. And so let's talk about the folks who would likely run in a 2023 Democratic primary, starting with the most obvious challenger to Kamala be Pete Buttigieg.
He's probably the top draft pick, I guess, for the Dems.
Yeah. So Pete has a lot of strengths, a lot of assets. He's very smart, very good campaigner, really excellent with the media. The media just seems to love Pete, and you understand it. He's an extraordinarily high-level media athlete.
He's super articulate. His depth of knowledge and policy, very, very good.
Yeah, his major deficiency in terms of electoral Democratic politics is that he's had a hard time connecting with voters of color, where if you look at his performance during the primaries, and it'd be funny, if there was a primary again, we'd be going to very well-trodden ground in the sense that it would be in New Hampshire, and Pete still has friends in a lot of these places. So Pete performed very well in Iowa, New Hampshire, and then when he got to Nevada and South Carolina, the bottom went out. His support evaporated, in large part because those constituencies were more diverse. And Pete has a very, very strong and clear appeal to conventional mainstream Democrats who are white, really. But so would it change over this number of months that Pete would develop that connection with voters of color? Who knows? His other potential drawback might be that he's a bit on the younger side. I think he's 39 right now. He would have been Secretary of Transportation for, several years, but that's not what people think of really as training to be president. Like I think most Americans would struggle to name any previous Secretary of Transportation. It's not really thought of as that kind of succession type pick. But Pete has very high name ID, at least among Dems. And so I think Pete is your strongest choice in part. And one of the reasons why I want to talk about this is that I think that Democrats need to be building up somebody. And Pete at least has been through a race, and so has some of that name ID and whatnot. Another person that was in that race that you can see running again is Amy Klobuchar. What do you think about Amy?
I think she hits the same lane as Pete does in many ways, in that the Midwestern, they're not actually like authentic or that relatable, but they're more authentic and relatable compared to, I think, a lot of other politicians. So they come off as folksy, and um, I think I think if it's Amy Klobuchar, the badass, she's a pretty compelling candidate. I think, at least if you're just talking about like a institutionally backed Democratic contender. What do you think?
One of the reasons why I'm animated about this is I think that it would be tough to pick any of these candidates against Trump in 24.
Oh yeah,
and so that's the thing that I want to try and really grapple with is that if you're the Democrats, I mean, the fact is Democrats lost to Trump once, in part because you had Hillary as the nominee. I think, and the fix was in for Hillary, and I think if it had been Bernie, then there's a chance that it goes the other direction. Even though Bernie wasn't quote unquote electable, and Hillary was quote unquote electable, and then your electable candidate loses to Trump, and so you've screwed that up once, and you're on the verge. This is my big thing: is like you're on the verge of screwing it up again, because you're going to run someone who's going to lose to Trump. Yeah. And we can all see this coming, by the way, again, 3 years beforehand. And I'm kind of beseeching, to the extent that there's, any chance of getting through to Democrats. It's like, you might want to get ahead of this freight train because their front page articles kind of painting the picture and you're like looking at it. Then we're going to talk about other things you could do to maybe prevent this catastrophe. I think that this field, it's going to be tough for any of them to beat Trump. And so one of the things that I'm going to suggest, first, let me address too. It's like, someone said, look, if the Democrats have a primary, some new people show up too, which is probably true. Some people likely saw me or Tom Steyer run last time, and then they show up. So, you don't know precisely who this field looks like. There might be some new actor. Heck, I could show up again. I'm not, Bernie's an independent and he ran. I mean, I could be like, hey, like I'm an independent. I'm running anyway. So like, no, would I do that? Probably not. But, but would there be someone who resembles that who shows up? Like, is there a bit of a process? Yes. But I think that the Democrats, if they wanted someone to beat Trump, would need someone who embodies some of the anti-institutionalist fervor that Trump embodies.
Right.
And none of the people we named actually have that energy or vibe. Like they all feel very, very establishment-y. Of the major Democratic contenders, the one who doesn't feel establishment-y at all is Bernie, because Bernie's just, like a socialist due to the people who wants to, redistribute things and like give things to poor people. And, it's like so people are like, okay, he's not corrupt or captive in the same way that they feel a lot of politicians are. So I feel like what Democrats should be doing is trying to just have one qualification, which is, does this person beat Trump? Not, do I wish this person, beats Trump, but like actually would defeat him. And so I think Democrats would be well served to go outside of their conventional candidates and find someone who actually has a bit of that energy.
This episode of the Forward Podcast is brought to you by BetterHelp. Is there anything preventing you from achieving your goals or interfering with your happiness? BetterHelp.com/Yang is a fantastic way to get your head on straight, in my opinion. BetterHelp can assess your needs and match you with your own licensed professional therapist. So connect in a safe and private environment online. It's so convenient. I've been using it probably for the past 8 months. You can start communicating in under 48 hours. It's not a crisis line. It's not particularly self-help. It's just professional counseling done securely online. And you can communicate with your counselor anytime, whether that's text or email or video, phone. It's pretty awesome, convenient, and it's available worldwide. So whether you're looking to help you with depression or stress or anxiety, relationships or sleeping or family conflicts, for me, it's about just letting off some steam and talking about the real things that happen in life. And now let's all be real. since COVID, we've all been going through it. So I want you guys to check out BetterHelp and start living a happier life today. So as a listener to Forward Podcast, you'll get 10% off your first month by visiting our sponsor at betterhelp.com/yang. So join over 1 million people who have taken charge of their mental health. Again, that's BetterHelp, HELP.com/yang.
One of the reasons I don't love Kamala, Pete, Joe, still a little bit, Klobuchar, is because they are Team Democrats in a sense, and they're institutionalized, and Trump eats politicians for breakfast, actually breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And it's too easy of a lane for him because he just could say everything's bad because of these people. He just gets to point the finger the whole time. And he's been that forever. It's authentic. People identify with it. He'll hammer it home. Here's my question for you. So in 2016, before you ran, in my mind's eye, I was like, how do you beat Trump? And my two ideas were either the whole party lines up behind like the plain vanilla candidate, which we ended up doing. It was Joe. But some were like, all right, this guy's like passable. It doesn't matter. Just get Trump out. Or I thought it had to be a young, anonymous. I thought it had to be a male to kind of combat his masculine energy, but like an unknown coming out of nowhere and maybe combating with a certain type of new politics. And Pete was that, and you were that. You both kind of checked that box. But I'm trying to look at 2024, and I'm curious your thoughts on if you, let's blank slate it, and I know it's not really fair, but theoretically, how do you defeat him? What is this, round 3, I guess? This is round 3 if Trump running for president, right?
Yeah, so I think that if the Democrats were to get behind someone like a Mark Cuban, that would be the best approach to defeat Trump, because you have someone who's a mavericky, no pun intended, mavericky billionaire businessman who is capital I independent. He's not a creature of the establishment. He's not like I think if you run anyone who smacks of Washington, D.C. or capital D Democrat, you lose. Like you need to go outside of your own backyard or in crowd and get someone who actually can make a similar case to Trump and say, okay, things suck. It's a mess. We need real change. And I represent real change. One of my beliefs is that Americans have just been casting about for change over and over again. Like Obama was change. Bernie was change. Trump was change. Joe, strangely enough, was change from Trump because people were like, okay, like I'm a little bit tired of of this shtick during the pandemic. And then now people, in my opinion, are getting tired of Joe. And then if you run Amy or Pete or Kamala, they're going to be the establishment, and they're going to have a tough. They're probably going to lose to Trump. So you need to go outside of the establishment and get someone. I think Cuban would make sense. I think if you were to go really far out, like you and get even like a well-loved celebrity figure, like an Oprah or The Rock, or like one of these types. I think it would steal a lot of the thunder from Trump. I mean, there are a lot of people that just, again, they want to change. They want someone independent of the machine. They want someone who can hold their attention in a positive way, and not just say political pablum that's bullshit. So this is the thing I want to emphasize is like, look, we can see that disaster is coming down the pike in 24. And so you should be thinking about trying to avert disaster and not just kind of trundle along, do the thing that comes naturally, and oh, by the way, you're going to lose, and then X months later we're looking up being like, okay, what the hell happened? So number one is trying to actually win fair and square along with the votes, and then number two would be to try and make sure that the vote count matters, because they're going to be trying to undermine and subvert election findings the whole time. There are tens of millions of Americans that now are on board with that general narrative and just refuse to believe that Trump loses unless it's stolen from him. And I said something to someone that I believe, and it's going to be tough. If Trump runs, I have a hard time imagining a scenario where we don't have some type of widespread political violence and unrest in 24. Because
Yep.
if Trump wins straight up, which again I see as right now probably the most likely scenario with some of the opponents that we've described,
Right.
then there are protests around the country because Trump won again, and you'd have people in blue states and in urban areas and other places protesting. You'd probably have people show up in D.C. protesting. Certainly, after Trump resumed living in the White House. But I think there'd be protests immediately. And if Trump loses and claims victory, then you'd have political violence from the other direction, where you'd have tons of MAGA folks out in the street saying the election was stolen again. I think that those people will be spoiling for a fight, particularly after Trump spends months ginning them up if he's running. So you are looking at a really, really bleak, tempestuous, tough season. And so one of the questions is, how can you try and strengthen people's sense of resolve around the vote and voting and other things? Now, this is some of the work that I'm doing with the Forward Party, which is, I think in 22, there is a chance that you can shift certain environments from party primaries to open primaries that could change the incentives for a critical mass of Republican legislators who could then look up and maybe pass legislation saying you can't fire secretaries of state, or you can't, like, for no reason, or you can't just have state legislators decide who the electoral votes go to. That's not the point of of the state legislators certifying. It's not just to counteract the will of the people. So we have an opportunity in 2022 that everyone should be staring at, and a lot of the action is around moderate Republicans who don't like Trump but feel like if they say a bad word about him, then their career is going to be over, or worse yet, that their families are going to be threatened. Did you read the article in The Atlantic about Peter Meyer and his experience? No. So I thought this was very, very compelling. There were 10 members of Congress who voted to impeach Donald Trump.
Right.
And originally it was looking like 20, and then it just went down and down and down because all of them were being threatened. And so this is an article by our friend Tim Alberta in The Atlantic about Peter Meyer, who, by the way, is only 33 years old, had just taken his seat, just shows up, and then is getting asked to vote whether to impeach Trump. And then he's getting text messages from everyone being like, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. And then he kind of stared long and hard in the mirror and was like, I think I have to do it. And then he ended up having his, his safety threatened and like all this stuff, and all these members of Congress. And so there's this thing where apparently a bunch of people were in the same situation, but a lot of them just decided out of fear for their own physical safety to just be like, I'm not going to vote to impeach Trump. And that to me, it's a very, very worthwhile read, this Tim Alberta piece about Peter Meyer. And I met Peter Meyer. I've actually known him socially for a while because I did work in Detroit, and he's been working hard in economic development for a long time. So I like Peter. I find him to be very reasonable and principled. So he did the right thing in this direction and paid a massive price. But interestingly, Peter seems like he's going to actually get reelected for a variety of reasons. But of the members of Congress who voted to impeach Trump, of those 10, 2 have already said they're not running again. Anthony Gonzalez in Ohio and then Adam Kinzinger in Illinois, which is a huge loss. So you have a very, very small number of Republicans who decided to stand up to Trump, and it hasn't gone well for them. I mean, that's the main thing in this article, is that the people who decided to stand up for principle were not shielded or rewarded.
Have you thought about certain friends and family members and what you're going to get them for the holidays this year? Well, we have a gift idea for you, and that's Hello Tushy bidets, because they are eco-friendly, they're a little techie, and they're actually affordable and super unique. It ticks all the boxes. So you can get Tushy bidets as a great gift for your eco-conscious cousin, your neat freak sister, your whoever you want in your family that might find this awesome, funny, or eco-friendly. It cuts your toilet paper use down by 80%, and they're pretty awesome. So look, they wash your bum with fresh water, and a better way to clean than toilet paper. It's simple spray and pat dry. It attaches to your existing toilet, so no plumber or electrician needed. Super easy. You can get it done in like less than 8 minutes. Pretty awesome. And it cuts down your toilet paper use and budget by 80%. So saving money and preventing yourself from excess waste. So join millions of Hello Tushy happy customers right now who take care of their this is the quote, they take care of their Yule logs the dignified way. That's ridiculous, but still hilarious. So here's the deal. Give the gift of a clean bum to yourself or your loved ones this holiday season and get 10% off plus free shipping right now at hellotushy.com/yang. That's hellotushy.com/yang for 10% off and free shipping. Do it right now.
One of the biggest challenges if you start throwing out names and celebrities is that they actually have to be media trained. And I don't mean media trained like they took a couple courses. Like they have to be a pro at navigating the media. And we're talking years of experience.
A pro, for sure.
Yeah, because it's hard. And if you watch, I mean, frankly, Howard Schultz, I thought would be a compelling candidate. Like guys like from working class background, built Starbucks from nothing, like cool story. And his first interview was like pretty awful. And not like, oh, you're a little rusty. Like, no, like, dude, like you haven't talked to a regular human in a long time, man. And Bloomberg had a bit of that too. And you can overcome it with money and things like that. But Cuban is one that's so compelling because he is in the public eye all the time, off script. You know, he's on podcasts, he's on shows.
Cuban's a media pro.
Yeah.
And Cuban also, and like I know Mark, Cuban can talk to a regular guy and is like totally comfortable.
Right.
He'll shoot the shit with anyone.
Right.
I mean, he owns a fucking sports team. Not to say that
right.
all these sports owners are able to do that because a lot of them can't.
Right.
but so that was a bad argument to use. But Cuban is is a relatable human in my experience.
Right now, it's Pete. It's like I don't know. I'm just a
right now
names.
It's Joe or Kamala.
Yeah,
right. And the other thing is so there has been some scuttlebutt, and this is very very DC-ish. It's very kind of House of Cards-ish. I don't know if you've heard this shit. It's actually West Wing-ish, where they're saying that they want to put Kamala on the Supreme Court as an elegant way of getting her. So everyone knows that it's going to be very difficult in terms of appearances to have Kamala step aside because she's a woman of color and you can't just shove the black woman aside and then insert some other dude. And so there has to be a way for her to exit gracefully. And so this is one of the ideas that's out there. So, it's like, can you see something of a reshuffling of the deck? Let me say for the record, I think that this is exactly the kind of thing you should be thinking about or doing, because just kind of like walking along and letting days pass and then looking up, in 23 and 24 and being like, hey, it turns out we're not excited about this plan. Like that's dumb. So, you need to make a clear-eyed call at some point and say, well, if we don't like the way this is going to lay out, then maybe we should be thinking creatively.
You're talking about future of the nation type stuff. Because if Trump just takes the election, and if it's close or he didn't actually win, but then takes it, I don't know what happens, but it's not going to be good. I don't know how you get him out of there because the rules are out the window.
If Trump wins again, which again, I will say it's like I see as the most likely scenario as we're having this conversation, unfortunately, because I'm no Trump fan at all. He's going to surround himself with the most corrupt sycophants and yes men and women. Whereas last time, if you remember, there was some cycling through some reasonable figures who were like, yeah, not so much.
There were a whole bunch.
Like a bunch of people. This time, all of that goes out the window. This time, it would be full on loyalists and really unsavory types. Trump would
Roger
just go in,
Stone's
and
getting
it would be
pardoned.
like you thought last time was bad. This stuff would get much darker.
10 times worse, yeah.
And then when Trump decides to do something, like it would actually maybe happen. Keep in mind, Trump also is getting older. He's going to be 77 in 2024. So I mean, you just imagine this unhinged 77-year-old who just wants to just settle scores. I mean, it'd be a disaster. So anything we can do to avoid this, we should be doing, which is why I'm trying to push hard and be like, look, if we just do business as usual, this is probably what happens, and it's going to make last time look like Sanity Central.
Yeah. If I'm Biden's team right now, it's probably what I'd do. I'd have a conversation with Joe and at a certain, figure out it sooner rather than later, but say, are you going to run again or not, bud? Like, do we want to? He has the right to run. He won the first time. Theoretically, he can do it again. I don't think he will at this point, but and then there's health, right? And if the answer to that is no, then he should at some point strategically, in my opinion, resign, which would be obviously a massive deal, never done before. But let Kamala come in, take the president spot, and lead for a year, get some experience there. But then you say, now have the right to do an open primary, you say, because she wasn't actually elected, we are going to have a primary, and you can run as the incumbent if you want, or you can just finish out the term. To me, that is, I don't know if it's the best thing optically, but it's not a bad choice. I don't know if your thoughts on that.
Well, I think if you go to Joe now and say, "Are you going to run again?" He says yes, and this is one of the problems because if your 79-year-old boss is like, yeah, and then they keep saying yeah, and then time passes, and then
the big run we don't want to run.
Yeah, this is an issue. I'm going to share something that I thought was fascinating. I talked to a woman who runs focus groups on voters, and she said that many voters use the phrase "bridge candidate" for Joe Biden. They say, he's a bridge, like he's, one term. And then when they ask, who's he a bridge to, like who's going to be president after Joe, voters drew a blank. They did not all just come out and be like, Kamala, Pete. They were just like, oh, like they were able to kind of superimpose their fantasy person after Joe. So I don't hate what you're saying in that, you want to actually have a real figure that Joe transitions to if it's not going to be Joe. So him resigning and then Kamala being the incumbent, at least then people would regard her in that light. Though I agree with you, she faces a competitive primary in almost any circumstance. I think the only person who avoids a primary is Joe. Well, so the other big part of this is that the Republican Party should be two parties. There should be a Trump party and then a moderate Republican party. The problem right now is the moderate Republicans are all beholden to the Trumpers in their districts, and so they can't make a principled decision. Ideally
you say the same about the left?
Democrats should be two parties too, a progressive party and then moderate Democrats.
Yeah,
and then there'd probably be a fifth party somewhere in the middle. It's called the Forward Party, and that would be a functional system. And then the Trumpers would represent about, let's say half the Democratic 30%. Party, maybe even a little more, but maybe like 30% of the entire total. And then we don't worry about having, autocracy in 3 years. I mean, like that's an infinitely better system. Now, can you get that done between now and 24? I mean, that would be the dream if they just turned around. And actually, I genuinely think that Democrats should be doing this. Is check this out. This is actually the best plan out of anything we talked about. Democrats, there is a way you can preserve democracy no matter what happens in 2024, and here it is. Just pass the Fair Representation Act, which shifts us from single-member districts to multi-member districts and leads to a genuinely multi-party system very quickly, because if you have a certain proportion of votes in a district, you get a representative. And then everything I'm talking about actually magically happens, where Trumpers, instead of controlling the Republican Party, they get 25%. You have moderate Republicans with some other percentage. All you need to do is pass the Fair Representation Act and democracy survives. I'm sure you won't do it because, that's not the way you think. But just look it up, the Fair Representation Act.
How does it work mechanically?
So mechanically,
yeah.
But what it does is it makes the U.S. look a lot like other modern democracies, where it's not that the people in a district get one rep. It's that. So let's say that there is a state that right now has, 5 members of Congress. And so the way it would work is, and there are 5 districts. So, each district, it's one. So what it is you combine it into one super district, and then the representatives get split up based upon the proportion of votes that each party gets within that super district. So if you had a normal district, you would probably have one progressive, one moderate Dem, one moderate Republican, one conservative Republican, and then the 5th would be, one of those 4 based upon maybe the Forward Party. Again, it'd be one of those things. So then every super district would have the same kind of breakup. And so you'd have Congress that looks like the parliaments of a lot of other countries, where you have, 20% of them are progressives. And, this is actually the best, most effective way to preserve our democracy. I don't talk about it that much because I know there's no chance that a majority of members of Congress look up tomorrow and say, you know what, we should just switch to genuinely a representative system and have a but this is the only way we're going to save, in my opinion, our country from this nightmare scenario in 24. So, hey, Fair Representation Act by 2022, then problem solved.
So if I'm a state, I have 5 seats in my state, 3 are super red, 2 are super blue. This would just be 5, and then depending on how the popular vote shakes out in my state, those 5 are divided up proportionally based on performance, or who performed well in the election. Is that how that works?
Well, you'd probably have a similar makeup, but it wouldn't be just 2 parties, probably, because then any group that got over 20%.
And this is a bill on the floor right now, or it's been sponsored?
It's been proposed, the Fair Representation Act.
Sorry, I'm so new to this.
No, don't worry about it. Our friend Rokana, I think, is one of the co-sponsors.
So, our future democracy relies upon passing
I think
bill.
this bill.
Awesome.
I think this bill literally has 4 signers. I should look it up. But this would be the saving grace. Okay, so what are the big takeaways? If you can see a giant disaster coming down your way a few years from now, you might want to think big about how you can prevent it and not just do business as usual, so that we all are left looking up wondering what the hell happened a few years from now. So think bigger. Fair Representation Act, recruit someone who can give Trump some of his own medicine. But if you just play by your usual playbook, we all suffer for it.
But we need to stop pretending everything's fine as the Democratic Party. That's the big one.
Yes. And if you're a journalist listening to this, also think bigger. I mean, come on.
Amen.
Why are you giving big tech companies rights and access to your data with no consequence? It's ridiculous. You've got, frankly, every time you go online, there are companies that are taking your location, browser history, you name it, and using that to make money off of you. And so to prevent them from doing that, Andrew and I both use ExpressVPN, and it's awesome. You download the ExpressVPN app. You can get it on your phone, get it on your tablet, get it on your laptop. I have it on my laptop. You press a button and you have your very, very own virtual private network where big tech companies, nobody can have access to where you are, what data are you using, and hides your IP address that makes you actively more difficult to trace and sell to advertisers. What's more, ExpressVPN encrypts 100% of your network data to protect you from eavesdroppers and cyber criminals. And what I like most is how freaking easy it is to use. It's one click. It's so easy. It was rated #1 by Business Insider and a bunch of other places. So let's stop allowing big tech to revoke our rights to free speech. Why not revoke their right to your data instead? Secure your internet with VPN that we trust for online protection. Visit expressvpn.com/yang. That's EXPRESSVPN.com/yang to get 3 extra months free with our exclusive link for the Forward Podcast listeners. Go to expressvpn.com/yang right now.
want to get your take on the school shooting in Oxford, because it actually, there's not always a lot to talk about with school shootings because they're just so tragic. But this one had some interesting policy implications. I want to get your thoughts on.
I think most people are familiar with the fact patterns. And the main issue right now is that the parents have been charged.
Yes.
And that's unusual.
And they've been charged with murder or like involuntary manslaughter, and not like child abuse or neglect or some of the other things that is usually the precedent in something like this. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so believe it or not, I went to law school a million years ago. And so my understanding of the way they're getting charged is under kind of the old school criminal law. So there are different standards of behavior. So there's, normal behavior, and then there's what's called negligence. And then there's a higher level of negligence, what you'd call criminal negligence, which then can spill into recklessness. And then after recklessness is some kind of motivated criminal behavior. So typically recklessness is a pretty high standard. And so what they're doing is they're arguing that in this case, the parents' behavior was so bad that you can hold them to be criminally liable based upon what they did, which is in this case buying a firearm for their 15-year-old son, and then ignoring various admonitions and warning signs and meeting with the school administration and some other things. It's a very, very aggressive legal tack, in my opinion. And I find myself torn genuinely on it in the sense that the fact that the prosecutors are trying to go in this direction, I think is something that is interesting. And I'm not saying that they're going to win, but I think it's interesting that they bring it, because if you're a parent in other parts of the country, like, oh shit, like you can actually get in trouble for that. Mm-hmm. And regardless of whether or not it ends up being a winning case for the prosecutors. And I think that's part of this. I think what they're doing is they're trying to bring this case in order to send a message that there is a line that you shouldn't cross around. And I don't think anyone would argue that they intended this, but that this was criminally reckless.
Yeah.
And then you look at this fact pattern and you think, okay, like, is there a fact pattern where you think that parents maybe should be responsible? And I think most of us can imagine a scenario where you're like, okay, that was like just, way beyond. Like if like your child came to you and was like, hey, like, I'm like, having these terrible, terrible, harmful thoughts, and you ran out and were like, hey, here's a gun, yeah. And then like there's a threshold at which you might want to actually have some kind of responsibility.
Right.
So I find myself torn, but kind of interested and sort of impressed, frankly, by the prosecutors taking this tack. Now, I am not sure that the parents either will be or should be held guilty. But I think that even if they aren't guilty under the law, it actually does send a message that's like, look, there's a threshold at which we're going to start trying to hold people responsible.
Right. And look, I always hesitate to like jump to conclusions when these cases are, it's just getting tried in the media right now. Like we talked about Kyle Rittenhouse and other things. Like there are things that we don't know everything, but what appears to have happened was that, yeah, the parents bought their 15-year-old a gun, and then he was caught in school both looking at bullets and then the day of the shooting drawing like horrific school shooting pictures. And then the parents who came in that day and met with a counselor allegedly didn't mention to the counselor or anyone that their kid just got a gun.
And they also didn't take it. They also didn't take him home.
Yeah, they left him there. I guess like this standard of when your kids fuck up, how much trouble do parents get in, right? And it feels like a gray. It's an important area to define, but it's gray, right? And I think guns you could probably just define as different. But if your kid takes your car and kills somebody with it, or takes your knife, or takes a chainsaw, or that sort of thing, and you were I don't know. There was
I
some
think
background or not to that.
generally speaking, I think most everyone agrees that it would be too much to hold parents responsible for the actions of their children.
Right.
I think this situation is something where it begins to blur that line because, the parents bought him a gun. And like anything else you just named, it doesn't make any sense. It's like, hey, I have knives in the house. Who cares? Hey, like there's a car in the house. Who cares? Like, it's like, hey, like, but in this case, it's like, look, I bought the kid a gun. And if you buy the kid a gun, there is some sense that you at least don't think the kid's a danger. Like if so I don't think parents should be held responsible for what their children do. Parents should be held responsible for what they themselves do. And there's only a very select number of situations where what the parents do actually can lead you to feel like, okay, they actually had some part in it.
I do like, it was one of these things like, okay, we have proven time and time again that we're unable, I'm not sure, unwilling, if it's a skill or a will problem, but we just can't regulate guns in the United States of America. But it did feel like there is maybe a shortcut is just regulate some of the stuff in public opinion, which maybe is to your point earlier, where this is like a social pressure that if your kids are having guns or people in your family having guns, that there's responsible gun ownership. At least that's expected of you, or massive consequences if you don't. I don't know, but it's tragic. My heart goes out to that entire community.
Yeah, it's awful. And it is the case too that, like thousands of parents are buying their kids guns and, nothing like this happens. I mean, that's happening around the country all the time.
But it's a killing machine. If you regardless where you stand on gun rights, like if people are going to have them, they better learn how to use them safely. Holy crap.
Well, this is one of the tragic things too, that, I wrote in my book, that there are 300 million firearms in this country, to your point about not being able to regulate them. I mean, this country is the most heavily armed place in the history of the world.
My parents in Florida, have a gun for safety reasons. It's like, there's no real instruction manual when you get one. You know what I'm saying? It's not like, and I'm talking about no one, they don't even have to, they don't really show you how to use it either unless you ask, generally speaking. Now there's some responsible gun shops, and I'm not an expert here, not pretending to be, but it does seem pretty easy to get and give out, man. And that's terrifying.
Well, it's one of the ingredients why we're going to see over the next number of days in the U.S. that disintegration is so painful here. It's like, it's like in another society, if there's like a mentally ill 15-year-old kid with violent fantasies, he's not going to.
That's all he is.
Yeah, he's not going to kill 4 people.
So we'll see how that trial plays out. I'm going to preserve my own, judgment till we learn more of the facts. It's not just from the prosecution, the media, but awful. But I'm glad you got your thoughts. Chris Cuomo was fired CNN for his role.
I was surprised that he was fired from CNN. I tweeted that, and some people beat me up over it. But he did some things that were obviously
not good, bad, possibly illegal.
I feel like a lot of them you kind of expected, because it was his brother, and his brother was in a tough spot. So you think that it was much more realistic, I think, to expect him to do things on behalf of his brother, to be like, oh, can't journalist, the rest of it.
Yes.
And CNN had already kind of started tiptoeing around this stuff because they'd allowed Chris to interview Governor Cuomo.
Yeah.
And so if you already are at that point, so I thought when he was suspended that would be it. I think that there's something else going on where either there's like a communication or some other piece of information that CNN is privy to that the rest of us are not, because and there are some people that thought he should be fired based upon the stuff that was already out. But I think there's something else.
Yeah, I don't really get mad about this type of stuff because look, and you and I, and Carly's been on here too. We've railed against the media. We have plenty. I think we know the media pretty well. But I'm never actually mad at their actions, like on a human level, because they're not pretending they're not biased. You know what I'm saying? Like, they're for-profit entities. They're not claiming. I mean, they maybe exude the fact that they're true news, but their bias is so obvious and their spin is so obvious, and I think that's kind of par for the course at this point. And in this case, your point, his bias was extremely obvious. Like, everybody knew it was his brother.
Totally
you weren't
obvious.
Going to CNN to be like, oh, let me get the objective take on the Governor Cuomo situation. Of course not.
I also will say that, like, I think I'm a bit biased on this one because Chris Cuomo was one of the better journalists to me on the presidential, where he seemed to actually take in what I was saying with an open mind.
Yeah.
Treated us with respect pretty early on in a way that was relatively memorable for me as a candidate. I was like, oh shit,
Yeah.
like Chris gets it. And so it could be that my reaction is influenced by that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the firing means surprising because, like, this is what they do. They do influence.
Now, I think there's something else going on too.
Yeah, I think so too.
Another thing too that I'll say, it's like I worked at CNN for a little bit. CNN does not seem to care about, like, quote unquote pressure or like op-eds. Like CNN genuinely just seems to do what it thinks it is best. Like Jeff Zucker, runs the place. He has his own. So there's something up that I don't think that we're seeing.
And they did allude to that, right? They did say, like,
they did allude to that. Yeah, I think there's something.
So that's rough. Maybe they're letting him save face or something, because the last thing anybody needs, not just CNN, all of us, we don't need a second Cuomo scandal. And this wasn't really a scandal. This was a bit of one, but, like, we all kind of saw it. It was kind of public. More inside Cuomo investigations, put it that way. I don't think we all are jonesing for that,
People who've been really up on my stuff know that I met Elizabeth Holmes at the White House. Actually, if you watch the Elizabeth Holmes documentary on HBO, which is a really good watch.
Bad Blood, what's it called?
Yes.
Bad Blood.
If you watch closely, you'll see I pop up in her White House photos, where when she's at the White House, it's like, there's Yang just sort of standing there. And so I met her, and I'm not sure if my meeting her pushes me in a particular direction. I feel like she defrauded people. And I think now she's presenting it as if her ex-boyfriend was like the mastermind Svengali type. And it's like, maybe, but I feel like she defrauded people personally.
You tweeted in April of 2019. I just Googled Andrew Yang, Elizabeth Holmes, found that picture. But then you said, guy asked yesterday what I thought when I met Elizabeth Holmes in the White House. It wasn't a long conversation. My main memory was that she had a deep voice.
So I don't know if you know that, but she
changed her voice. Yeah.
Yeah, just talking to her, she was like, "Hi," and I'm just like, "Huh." It seemed like an affectation, but I was like, what do I know? This is one thing I will say. Oh man, I'll say it because I thought it. Whatever. So I have met dozens, hundreds of impressive entrepreneurs over my career, impressive people, and there's you have too. And there's like a certain energy that a lot of them emanate, particularly entrepreneurs. Meeting Elizabeth Holmes, I did not come away with that feeling. I did not come away with that feeling of like, oh, like this I can see how this person founded a $1 billion company, blah, blah, blah. It's like, there's like a certain presence or aura or like, energy. Like I didn't get that.
Interesting.
From her. Now, and that's a recollection I remember like contemporaneously. Like that wasn't me like going back.
You still remember that, yeah.
Yeah. Like I remember, it's like I remember meeting her and being more like the word I would use for myself was confused. Like I met her and I came away confused. I was like, I don't know what to make of that person or this conversation, or like it wasn't clear to me at all. And so then later when this information comes out, I'm just like, oh, that's not good.
That's so fascinating though, because she's known for charming everyone, the being so impressive, like Henry Kissinger, and go down to the Waltons, like all these, in many ways, American institutions are like infatuated with her and her pitch. My question for you on this is, I want to talk about like entrepreneurs massaging the truth, and I don't mean that lying. Like I think it's all like if you're like that's fraud, right? If you're like I don't want to mean defrauding investor and doing things that are deceiving investors is what I'm looking for. But what I mean is like, when you're starting, you're trying to get that first investment or you're bootstrapping, that sort of thing. You're not telling them, you're not showing all your warts. You know what I'm saying? Like you're not, you're going to paint a great picture of what you are going to build that's going to be aspirational very naturally in doing this. Have you ever like lived the at least from your end and people pitching you, because I know you've done a lot of those, like people like not telling you the whole truth, or where's that line? Because I do think it's more gray. Obviously the line is like fraud, right? But it's in between there, it can get kind of gray in the startup world.
It can get gray in the startup world, but that Theranos shit was fraud, man. I mean,
that was. Jesus. But if you listen,
stuff.
I've listened to podcasts a bit. Some of these like Bad Blood podcasts talking about the Holmes trial, and she's like, she does make some blatant lies, and they like slapped a Pfizer logo on like they forged like a document that got them $100 million. Like they lied a lot of shit, but there's a lot of stuff that are like half truths. And she was very, very smart how she chose her words a lot of time. Like, for example, they, there was a lot of upside with Theranos' ability to be in the battlefield. Like, so if you're a soldier, you can, you theoretically test your blood in the helicopter, and you could be able to start transfusion on the fly, like saving thousands of lives. And she has this incredible story about how this could work. She never says that they actually developed this product and that it works. And that's because like they didn't actually have a defense contract. They had nothing. So but the turns of phrase you were using that were like actually not fraudulent when you see them in writing, but it's fraudulent in the feel, I don't know if you ever felt that. Sorry, I interrupted you, but
no, not at all. I mean, so there's like some stuff where you hype it up. And as long as you don't lie, like that stuff's kind of par for the course.
Yeah.
And Theranos, I mean, there was a lot of lying going on, as you said. The hype stuff is like, sure, that stuff you do see a lot of. If you're a discerning investor type, though, I mean, you just cut through it. You'd be like, hey, so you have a defense contract? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, it's like, I don't know, like in dating, though, right? When you first meet somebody, and both of you, like you're both like the person you want to be, and then over time you figure out, everybody learns who you actually are.
To your point, Zach, I feel for entrepreneurs because, you do have to really sell the dream. And then sometimes when it goes to shit, people are like, oh, screw you, I hate you. And then you're like, some of those people.
Sorry.
Like, I mean, one example of this is like I read the book and interviewed the authors of the book on Adam Neumann and WeWork.
Oh yeah.
And that stuff. I think it's Newman actually, but
I think it's
and you look at him, people pillory that guy, but then part of it is like, well, I mean, he built like a big company out of nothing, and there was initially something there, and the rest of it. So like they're like, and in that case, there was like a lot of culpability in the system where a lot of people were like, well, we'll make money, we'll just like freaking ride this train. So
yes.
So there's like a mixed bag. I mean, were there a lot of people that really wanted to believe the idea of like the brilliant woman founder of this blood testing company, and that it would be this incredible story? It's like, there were some biases that I think she used in her favor. It was funny. It's like in a way she like subverted the sexism. Because I mean, I think it's very, very difficult for women entrepreneurs, and to get some of the credibility at certain stages. And then she managed to do it all. It's of course, in her case, it wasn't real, which makes in some ways all the more painful because she was on the cover of Fortune magazine. She was at the White House, and we'll close with this too. It's like I was at the White House, presidential ambassador of global entrepreneurship. I do think that there was a little bit of cherry picking of the people who were in that group based upon our identities. Like I joked at the time that I was like, hey, I'm like the token Asian. I probably was a token Asian, like I might not be joking that much. And Elizabeth Holmes, I think, was there in large part because she was a young woman. And they kind of built a picture. They built a photo. I think that it's one of the frustrations of some people. And some people, it's like, does representation matter? Yes, it does. Should we be just trying to cram reality into photo ops so that it's like, oh, we got to have one of each and this, and if it's not there, then they're like no, it's like, there needs to be some substance that is real, and that if you pursue the appearance in the face of reality, sometimes you end up with very, very bad things, like much worse than frankly, the egg on your face of having a fraudster like as part of a White House photo. I mean, who cares about that really? Though, on one level you could be like, okay, that's not good. But at the very, very extreme, you wind up trying to sell people a reality that could, and I'm going to say something very difficult as a capstone to this conversation. If we're unable to have difficult conversations about Kamala Harris's electability because people are afraid to say something because she's the first woman of color VP. Oh, by the way, our entire democracy may hinge on our ability to have an honest conversation about whether she's the right choice. Someone needs to step up and have the hard convos because the country's destiny relies on it.
That's a very good way to put it, man. It's I don't know. I think people are getting afraid of being cast as a racist, being cast as an asshole. I don't know, just like Twitter backlash. I don't know.
It's one reason why I just go with the empirical. It's like, look, polls 5 points worse than Joe. I mean, you can't argue with that. It's just a number. But but ignoring that is potentially disastrous.
Yeah, I mean, look, Trump is the definition of authentic, at least to himself. I know he's a liar and there's the thing, but the people who support him feel like he is honest with them. He's established an authentic connection with his supporters. This one of the things Kamala's been hit on her entire career is that lack of authenticity, and a lot of Democrats are bad at this. So that's the big challenge we have.
That is the problem, man. Democrats don't talk like human beings talk. It's like Democrats talk like politicians talk, and the shit is just not working anymore. And so we need to grow up, or else we're going to wind up with autocrat Trump 2024. And if that happened, this is going to be, it's like Democrats lost to this guy once in 2016, almost lost him again in 2020. I mean, victory's a victory. So, got to clap him on the back. But can't lose to him twice. Shouldn't have lost to him once. Can't lose to him twice.
This is the moment where I'm just like, all right, we should stop talking and do something. So I'm like, all right, Andrew, maybe you should run again. But I don't know if I obviously think you're a world of a better candidate and better human being than this guy, but I don't know if you'd be able to beat him. I don't know what have you thought.
You're saying I think if I were the Democratic candidate and the establishment machine got behind me, I think I'd beat him because the Democrats would be like, sure, into it. And then I think I'd get a bunch of the middle folks.
I agree.
But I think trying to entertain that possibility is, I'm saying that the establishment somehow got behind me, which I think we've all seen. Is not it's not exactly their first impulse. So I'm not necessarily saying hey, choose Yang. I'm saying choose someone who can beat Trump if you get behind him.
It's 4 or 5 states, man. That's what you have to focus on. Who polls better there?
That's true. And those numbers came out last week. And by the way, right now it's Donald Trump. So
it's not good.
it's not good.
They always show these national polls, and those are worthless. You have to look at the Michigan, Ohio, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and now I guess like Georgia, Arizona, and a few others. But
yep, those are the states. Let's do it. Let's preserve civilization.
Fair Representation Act. That's what it's called.
Yep, Fair Representation Act.
I'm into
Forward
that.
party, nonpartisan primaries, ranked choice voting, third party, trying to activate the people. One thing I will say too, we are collecting $5 donations to the Forward Party through the end of December. So if you are into the Forward Party, just donate $5-10. It's not about the money. It's just about raising your hand and saying that we need a different approach to politics. Anyone who donates to that, you're going to be helping us a lot, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to take all of these individual donors that we have and then go to deep-pocketed folks and say, hey, look, the people want this. So if the people want it, then I'm going to be able to take that case.
There you go. Forwardparty.com?
Yep, forwardparty.com. Let's fix it.
All right, guys. We'll be back next week. Later.